Hi everyone, and welcome to a new show of KNA TV. Here with me today, Tom Canton Media from. He's a writer for Football London, if I'm in right, and he got his private podcast. So I would like all you to first of all follow him on the Twitter, and then on the Gooner Talk TV. He published a video on the weekly basis, and maybe more. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tom, thank you for coming, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
So, Tom, this season is, let's say, going well for us for now. How do you see it? Do you see positive, negative, or something, let's say?
I think you can't really complain too much. Arsenal currently, just second in the table behind Liverpool and top their Champions League group. It's gone really, really well so far this season. I think, obviously, it's not been as, I think, free-flowing as last year. We haven't looked as dominant in every game that we've played like we did last season. But I think that's because Arsenal are building towards something different, whereas last season we kind of fell away in the second half of the season and weren't able to sustain that challenge. This season, it seems that we're building gradually and improving, week in week. So, yeah, I think there's reason to be excited as an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, so you first mentioned Arsenal UEFA Champions League. The last match was played yesterday, 1-1 against the PSV, but it was okay for us because we expect even more change in the first 11. But Mikel Arteta said after the match that he didn't feel it was the moment for the new player, for the youth player like Nwaneri, Walters was there, and who was out there. So how do you see that what he said about he didn't feel it was the moment? Do you think it was the moment? Because I saw on your Twitter that you published, we are too strong for this match.
Yeah, well, I'd heard ahead of kickoff that the likes of Saliba, Gabriel, and Havertz were starting, and I was like, oh, okay, so we must be going pretty strong. It turned out they were the only players that carried on from the game at the weekend, so it wasn't as overall as strong as I thought that it might have been. He made 8 changes, so he did rotate the team quite heavily. But you're right to ask the question about when is it going to be the right time to play these kids, because in a game which meant absolutely nothing regarding competitivity, we were already top of the group. It was a chance to rest players if we wanted to, and also the only thing that was on the line was a bit more extra prize money, which Arsenal got around 800,000 for the draw last night. They would have got about £2.4 million if they'd have won the game, as you get for in the Champions League group stages, which is a significant amount of money to you and me, but maybe in the context of football not so much. But I think that it's more important that Arsenal gave that chance to some of the youngsters in, certain moments. For instance, Cedric started at right back. I don't really necessarily see how it was more beneficial to use a player who will be ultimately leaving, come the end of this season. I think we can all agree, even maybe earlier in January, instead of maybe a youngster like Walters and giving him the chance to play in a game. And then, of course, you've got Gabriel Jesus coming on with 5 minutes to go instead of Nwaneri. I mean, again, I don't know why that was necessary, really. If anything, you're risking a starting player maybe getting injured in 5 minutes. You're risking other players coming on to get injured in a game which doesn't necessarily matter. But I think Arteta will turn around and say that he wants to make sure that we try to win the game and we respond from the weekend. But I just feel like maybe we could have been a little bit more adventurous with our choices.
I saw on our Facebook page a few comments that since he's here, Arteta, he just didn't get the minute to some young player. So if you compare a little bit, Martinelli and Saka, they were all played by Unai Emery, firstly, but Saliba was played by Mikel Arteta, and Nwaneri got his chance to debut in the Premier League, like the youngest player ever. So do you think there will be more in the near future of young players that will get their chance, or do you think Arteta will stay on this path?
Yeah, I think that a lot of fans have the view that Arteta's not necessarily wildly keen on bringing players through from the academy because we've not necessarily seen it. What I would say is that, he's given new contracts to a lot of Hale-End graduates. Saka, Smith Rowe, Nelson and Ketia have all been given new deals under Arteta. So he clearly does value the Hale-End graduates that we've got. I think that there is an emphasis on there being a bit of a contradiction. We can't ask Arsenal to be hyper competitive in every game and at the same time moan that he's not giving kids an opportunity, because we could weaken ourselves to the point where we're throwing a kid in an important game, in an important moment, maybe at the end of a game, and then it has a negative impact, you know. So I think there is a slight contradiction. But in yesterday's game, there was obviously a chance to play some of the kids, and we didn't do that, which I think will certainly lean more into the argument that Arteta has got an aversion to using some of them. But I think that we will see them get a chance. I think we will see him bring through his own youth stars, and he's obviously using these young players, you know, in squads. He's bringing them into the setup. He's giving them opportunities to be with the senior team. He uses them in training quite a lot. So he does use them, but until we see him give a debut and start to give opportunity. I mean, Charlie Patino, he gave us a competitive debut to in the FA Cup and obviously in the League Cup as well. But yeah, we want to see more, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. So when you mentioned Charlie Patino, he's for me doing very well in the. He's doing very well in the Swansea. Yeah. Do you think? I hear that. I mean, I read that his contract. We renewed his contract about that option for 2 years. And do you know what's the latest on that thing? Do you think there will be some news on the Charlie Patino? Because we saw on the start of the summer transfer window, David Ornstein published that Charlie Patino is expected to leave the Arsenal in the summer transfer window, but something happened. I don't know what happened, but do you think there will be some news again around that, or do you think it will be quiet for some time?
Yeah, I don't think that the opportunity arose last summer for that to happen. David Ornstein was absolutely correct in what he said, and I chased up that line further, and it was all the reason why Patino was open to a permanent move, because the timing really wasn't working out for him at Arsenal. You know, he's come through and had a good season at Blackpool. Coming back to the club, Arsenal then spent £105 million on Declan Rice. We've just spent, in the previous January window, £12 million on Jorginho. Thomas Partey was still there. We obviously brought in Vieira the previous summer as well. You got Smith Rowe that's there, Ødegaard that's there. Lokonga obviously was brought in 2021 as well. So there's a lot of depth in Arsenal's midfield options, be it still there or on loan. And I agree that timing was a big issue as to why Patino's not necessarily felt like the pathway was there. If that changes this summer, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, as you mentioned, Arsenal activated that 2-year option in his contract before last summer, which meant that he had 2 years at the start of this season left. So he'll return to Arsenal in the summer with still a year left on his deal. And then a decision will be made either if Arsenal can agree a new deal with him, or if indeed he does want to try and find that permanent move. But if he does, you know, Arsenal will hope to get a decent fee, but he's only got a year left on his deal, so that will affect things. But I think he's had a great season at Swansea so far. He's scoring goals. He's making, you know, influential moves. Yes, there was, I think, a red card maybe earlier on. Maybe that might have been at Blackpool last season, but I think he has matured and developed, and I think he is producing, you know, a level of player at his age that Arsenal would be intrigued to see if he can say rise above the likes of Lokonga in the team, maybe give more than Jorginho can as an option in certain positions. He is seeming to specialise more so as a more forward-thinking centre midfielder. So that does create an issue for him, because Arsenal have got Ødegaard and Vieira and Smith Rowe and Havertz and Trossard that can all play attacking midfield roles. So that might still close the door, but he is slightly different in that he's more of a box-to-box, I think, type of midfielder. So maybe there's space for him in the team in that left 8 position.
Yeah, but we have to be honest too that Thomas Partey is 30 years old. We have Jorginho, who is, I don't know, 32, 33 almost. El Neni, and he got injured probably last night. So maybe giving Charlie Patino at least a chance in the pre-tour, it won't be bad decision for me. You know, I don't know. How do you think? How do you see that? Maybe Arteta will give him a chance in the pre-season tour.
Yeah, he might do. We might see, obviously, Arsenal's pre-season tour next year hasn't been officially confirmed as to where or what we're doing, but there is the European Championship, so it will be a shorter pre-season than what we saw this summer, where we were, you know, playing the Emirates Cup. We went to the US. We played in Germany as well against Nuremberg, as we did the season before that as well. I don't think there'll be as an extensive, you know, pre-season. It'll probably be a small tour and maybe the Emirates Cup that we see, because obviously players will be having an extended break after the European Championships and obviously the other tournaments that go on as well during that time period. So maybe he gets a chance. We'll have to wait and see. It'll depend on who leaves. As you mentioned, Partey, I think there's potential for him to leave. I think El Neni's deal will come to an end and he will probably move on as well. And Jorginho has to make a decision. Arsenal have an option to extend his deal by another year if they want to, but that doesn't mean that they will. And there's been no suggestions that talks have taken place at the moment as to whether they want to do that with Jorginho or not, because there's not a rush to, because they have the option on that deal. So, yeah, and then Smith Rowe's future is still very much up in the air. Fabio Vieira doesn't necessarily seem to have nailed down a spot in the team either, and there's been interest from, you know, clubs potentially about a loan, but he's currently injured as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of question marks about Arsenal's midfield and what it might look like after this season.
Yeah, we put I don't know, 150 million euros this season and more, and we are still short. You know, it's kind of frustrating. But okay, you told me about Jorginho, but I think it wouldn't be a bad option if he stayed in some role like a tutor. I don't know, you know, like just to help a young player like Patino to prepare themselves for the Premier League, for the UEFA Champions League. You know, for me, it wouldn't be so bad decision if we give Jorginho one more year and then let him leave the next summer to Italy, probably the last destination for his football career. So you mentioned, and you were the first that I saw on the Emil Smith Rowe a few days ago that he's back for training. I didn't expect that yet, so it was a kind of surprise for me. What's your latest update or opinion on the Emil Smith Rowe? Do you see him in Arsenal in the next years, or do you think he will leave the club? I know that Ornstein too published this summer that Arsenal don't have any plan to sell Emil Smith Rowe, and then Emil Smith Rowe got an injury again, and it's becoming really frustrating for me, for a player that in the March of 2021, my friend was going to London to match, and I told him, "You will buy me a shirt of Emil Smith Rowe." It was like, you know, Emil Smith Rowe, number 10. Everything was fantastic. You know, I got a feeling that he will be our forever, and this injury are destroying him. So, how do you see him, and what's your latest on his career in Arsenal?
Yeah, well, it was great to see him obviously return yesterday and get back from injury slightly ahead of what maybe some people were expecting as well. I saw him at training at London Colney on Monday, and it was, you know, great to see him back and getting a round of applause from the group to applaud him coming back. But I think that it's still very, very much up in the air as to what his future holds. I think that Arsenal, as has been pointed out, will want him to stay. And I think Arteta will want him to stay. They've protected him with a long-term deal, so that's obviously a positive. But I think if a really good offer came in for him, Arsenal would certainly consider it. And I think that he would consider it as well, because I think he recognises that unlike when he was starting during that, I think it was the 21-22 season on that left-hand side, scoring in the North London derby, you know, with a front three of him, Aubameyang and Saka, you know, I think he thought then that this is my future. This is where I'm going to be. And, you know, I'm going to be Arsenal's left attacking midfielder and it'll be all, you know, happy and dandy. But it's not turned out to be that way, because Martinelli's obviously come through and impressed a lot. And Smith Rowe's had his injury problems and he can't stay fit, which is obviously something that a lot of Arsenal players have had and that Mikel Arteta does get frustrated with, you know, that he loses key players. And so I think he'd rather a player maybe in his place that was more available more often than him. And there's also an argument of where he fits, because Martinelli is an out-and-out left winger. I think Smith Rowe is more of a 10 than anything else. And Arsenal don't really play with a 10 because we play with like two attacking 8s, if you like, that have to have more defensive contribution. Kai Havertz certainly does. Odegaard has contributed a lot more and is playing slightly deeper. And I'm not sure if Smith Rowe is and does fit into this Arsenal team when they play their normal and best system. So everything's kind of working against him right now, which sucks for him. But obviously no one player is bigger than the club, and it would be really sad to see him go. I just hope that if he does, that it's not to necessarily a direct rival, although I'm not sure why anyone lower than, say, you know, Aston Villa, for instance, would not be interested, because he's a very talented kid. But if he goes to a big club, it's going to have to be a big fee. It's, to my understanding, Arsenal would have expected, because Chelsea were mentioned in the summer, Chelsea would have been expected to pay more than if it was another team going in for him, because they're a direct rival. So that's, and I don't blame Arsenal for being in that way inclined.
Yeah, it was fun in the summer when there was that news about Emil Smith Rowe, and it was a story about a swap between Emil Smith Rowe and Mihailo Mudryk, and there was then that if Chelsea won Emil Smith Rowe, they will have to pay a lot more than anyone else. So let's talk about more players that are still absent. We are here: Thomas Partey, Fabio Vieira, and of course Jurrien Timber. The latest was the biggest. I don't know how to say that, but I was so depressed when that happened. I told to my friend who is following Arsenal that Jurrien Timber first 3 matches, it looked like he's here for 10 years. It was just so simple. What's the latest on Jurrien Timber? I saw a few reports that he's already on the grass, just easy running. So, is there any specific date, maybe month, when anyone expects him to be back? Arteta a few times said that he doesn't want to put any time scale because it's very, very bad thing that happened to Jurrien, and that we need to go really, really slow with his return.
Yeah, well, he was injured in August with obviously a serious ACL injury, and typically those are between 7 and 9 months to recover from to get back to the field. So you'll be looking if he's following that timeline between March and May. However, obviously injuries evolve differently in the recovery, and obviously we're now several months after that injury with August, September, October, November, December, 5-6 months, 5 months after that now that it's developed and recovered from. So we're in a period where we could see him back before the end of the season, because Arteta says he's flying. Timber did an interview the other day with reporters where he said that he's close to getting back onto the grass. Our friend of ours, Dr. Rajpal Bra, who does our Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat show, is a speciality in physiotherapy. He does a lot of work with these types of injuries, and his his theory is that if he's close to being back on the grass now, it wouldn't be all that surprising to see him back before the end of the season. So I'm hopeful that we might see him in April, May. That'd be great. I don't know that. It's impossible to know right now, but I'm hopeful that we might see him back by that time, that he can have a hand in the end of the title race. But there's also part of me that thinks that maybe we shouldn't rush him back. Maybe we should just let him recover for the whole season, and then he can be basically like a new signing, which I know is a saying people hate, but he can be like a brand new signing next season, and we use him and integrate him into the team for next season and hope that he's fully recovered. Because if you rush yourself back from these types of injuries, it can be really detrimental. You look at Hector Bellerin, for instance, so you don't want to be in a position where you don't come back in the right moment at the right time and then re-suffer the injury, and then it can have a really, really detrimental. If you suffer it quickly a second time, very few players end up, coming back anywhere close to the level that they once were.
Yeah, one player that is I know, injuring himself like at least 2 times per season. It's Thomas Partey. It's really frustrating for everyone. What do you think is the latest on him? I saw on the few report that maybe transfer in the transfer window that is coming. It's not ruled out yet, but Arteta this summer wanted him to stay, but I read that if there was suitable offer, that Arsenal would accept it. So what do you think was the latest on the Thomas Partey? When will he return? I saw some reports that Liverpool may be too early, but maybe he could make it.
Yeah, there's a lot of I think secrecy around not secrecy, but there's a lot of unknowns around the Partey return, because Arsenal obviously keeping it very much to themselves. There's not too much information coming out about it. I mean, transfer-wise, I think, again, he's in the bracket of players that if Arsenal get a suitable offer, they will entertain it. Like I said with Smith Rowe earlier on. But obviously, if he's fit and available, he is one of our best players. So it's always worth remembering that. Whether he'll be back for Liverpool is, again, Arteta said that would be a very quick recovery if he manages to do that. So I guess the next chance we'll hear from Arteta is on Friday in his next press conference to hear an update specifically from the training ground. But yeah, there was and has been suggestions that they were targeting Liverpool. If he misses Liverpool, I doubt that they'll rush him back for the games against West Ham and the like after Christmas. So yeah, let's wait and see. But there's no real update regarding yes, he'll be back for this date. We just don't know at this stage.
Fabio Vieira?
Fabio Vieira's got he had a significant injury that he had to undergo a procedure for. So it'll be New Year, maybe late January, maybe February, depending on that. Tomiyasu as well. He's obviously we expect him from the injury, which is against Wolves. That was what, 2 weeks ago. So I think we're probably about a month away from Tommy being back. So again, probably mid to late January for him.
Yeah, but I think the injury of Tomiyasu was like a big blow because he just got in the fantastic. His performance were fantastic, and it was like, okay, Ben White is now on the bench and he's waiting for his chance. You know, Tomiyasu was playing really, really good for my opinion. But so yeah, injury is bad. But then we have a Asian Cup, if I'm correct, in the January. So yeah. He goes there. It's month at least more, so I think we won't see him here until February again. Maybe some miracle happen, but I'm not so sure. So the 1 year exclusive was on the Aaron Ramsdale, and my question is, do we expect Aaron Ramsdale to leave the club in this January transfer window or not?
I'd be surprised if he did. I've reported at Football London that an approach made to Aaron Ramsdale from a lower Premier League side from the bottom half was turned down. So I think obviously he wants to move forwards with his career if he does move. But he's very focused on Arsenal. You know, he's professional. He's trying his hardest in every single training session. He's not wavered, even though he's obviously frustrated with the lack of minutes. But I think the likeliest January move would be Newcastle because they've got Nick Pope out injured at the moment for quite a significant period of time. Eddie Howe has obviously worked with Aaron Ramsdale before. He's a big fan of Aaron Ramsdale. And I'd be unsurprised if there's been no contact, but certainly regarding kind of that deal and if there's been any kind of talk between the clubs, I'm certainly not aware that that's happened, but that can change very quickly during the January window and up to the January window. So we'll have to wait and see. Arsenal will obviously want a profit on the 32-ish million pounds they paid Sheffield United for him back in 2021, and for good reason, because he's only just signed a brand new deal, you know, so there's no pressure for Arsenal to sell, certainly. And, you know, I don't think there's necessarily enough been shown by Raya that he's, in fans' minds at least, the out-and-out number one and the unrivaled number one. Ramsdale was okay, you know, last night. I don't think the goal was his fault. It was a really good finish from Vertessen onto the post. And, you know, I wasn't looking at Ramsdale for that at all. I think he distributed the ball fairly well as well. So, yeah, I don't think that there's a big chance he leaves in January at the moment, but that can change very quickly. If not, I would be surprised if he was still here for next season if Raya has not been, you know, usurped from that number one role.
I don't know if you can tell me, but that you're exclusive. You said the approach was turned down, but was it turned down by Arsenal or
no?
I don't know.
Not turned down by Arsenal.
Okay. So, do you think? I mean, when Raya came, it was, you know, like, okay, we got one more fantastic keeper, but did you expect that change will come so soon? You know, it was like when Eleno was here and Ramsdale came in, and it was like 3 matches in the new season. Puff, Ramsdale is a new keeper, and everyone were okay with that. But now when it happened with Raya, it was like something like, okay, not so sure. People don't like Raya so much. How do you see that change? Do you think it was too soon, or it was okay with you?
I haven't got an issue if Arsenal and Arteta and the recruitment team want to go out into the market and buy a player that they think will upgrade on one of the positions. And I personally think that David Raya is a slightly better goalkeeper than Ramsdale. I think the numbers are too widespread and too evident to suggest otherwise. But Raya obviously has made mistakes. But I think that the dynamic between the two keepers has led to both keepers being more prone to mistakes, because I think there is extra pressure on them, more expectation on them. I'm not particularly a great fan of how supporters in the ground when Raya has played have treated him at times either. I think, you know, chanting Aaron Ramsdale's name when David Raya is between the sticks is not right. I don't think that helps the goalkeeper in any way. That's not supporting your goalkeeper. That's kind of doing the opposite in some ways. So I think the added pressure on Raya has obviously contributed to an added maybe an added input on some of the situations he's had that have caused mistakes. I think that Arteta could have used Ramsdale in the Champions League games to give him more of a chance and maybe to take the expectation when he did come into the team like he did against Brentford and had those high-profile errors, it wouldn't have been as, the narrative would not have been as great. And if Raya was playing the league games and Ramsdale was playing the Champions League and Cup games rather than just the Cup games, I think that would have helped the situation more as well. But it's not, and I think that maybe Arteta has made a bit of an error in that regard. I also think that if you're going to bring in a goalkeeper to upgrade, because it's not like an outfield position where a player can play in multiple roles or he can play with the player that he's going up against. Like we've seen Saka and Trossard and Martinelli on the field at the same time, you know, this season. It's not a case of one or the other. But with a goalkeeper, it is a case of one or the other. And so I think if you're going to bring in a keeper, you probably need to make sure that that keeper is significantly better than the one that you've already got to justify that decision. Otherwise, you create a scenario where there is an argument that either of them could start. So I'm not sure we did that effectively enough, but I just hope that there's a resolution. I think that will probably come in the summer. And then once we know our established number one, if we go and sign a number two, that it's an established number two, that it's probably an older goalkeeper that would be better, one that is, you know, more experienced, know that they would be that number two goalkeeper, but can also distribute the ball relatively comfortably. So like I wouldn't be after a David De Gea, for instance, because he's not got that distribution that we need from our keeper. I think Stefan Ortega at Man City is a great example of going out and signing an older keeper that knows their number two, but also has plenty of quality about them as well.
Yeah, it was even my idea for Arsenal, maybe to bring some older keeper that will be here to help to player like Ramsdale or something. But I don't mind that we brought Raya. I think he's a very, very good keeper, and the number are going for him, of course. The next subject I would like to talk with you is Mikel Arteta and Football Association. We are expecting the punishment for Mikel Arteta. I think it will be a ban for a match. And even I won't hide, I'm expecting it to be for Liverpool on Anfield. Do you have any info when will be that's known? Do you expect it will be an Anfield, maybe one match ban, maybe two? What do you think?
I have no information regarding what the charge will be as we record this at 10:30 UK time on Wednesday. But we should be hearing very, very soon what that outcome is. The hearing has happened. You know, we're now just kind of in a situation of trying to wait and see when we will find out what happens. So, yeah, no information about what it is as we stand right here, right now. But as far as I'm aware, we should hear very, very soon what it is.
Okay, and one of the players that scored the first UEFA Champions League goal last night, Eddie Nketiah. I think Eddie is a very, very good boy for me. You know, I never saw that he's making some problem or something. I think he's, you know, good as you like, let's say. But do you think future is for Eddie in Arsenal, or do you maybe think in the summer there will be some change regarding Eddie Nketiah?
I think the thing with Eddie Nketiah is that when he starts, he scores goals, and there's not too much to argue against that. He's got a record of 1 in 2 when he starts games, which, as I point out on my channel, is the same as Ivan Toney's from non-penalty goal perspective. So he's a very similar record to Ivan Toney for non-penalty goals per start in the last couple of years. They're both around 1 in 2. And so I think that the problem is that Eddie Nketiah's record of when he starts is good, but in turn, he's not the starting goal scorer he's not the starting striker for Arsenal. So it's good, but it's also a curse because his best attribute is not what he's going to be doing at Arsenal. He's mainly going to be coming off the bench, and his record coming off the bench is not good. You know, I think he's got 1 goal in something like 30 odd appearances coming off the bench, maybe even more than that. And if you are in a situation where you're a player that needs to come off the bench and score, and you're not doing that, that's when you're going to start seeing calls for you to be replaced. If it was a case of the other way around, because Jesus' record coming off the bench to score goals isn't actually too bad. You know, we saw him score that goal against Manchester United when we won 3-1 earlier this season. I think that Jesus is obviously a far more rounded centre forwards. He's not just a finisher, and he doesn't just score goals. He produces assists. He creates chances for his teammates. He's a lot more better with his movement, with his physicality and holding the ball up and being a bit of a target man, even though he's on the smaller side. So Arsenal and Arteta, I think, want a player like that and want a striker like that. And Nketiah sadly isn't that. But by signing a new deal, what they have done is they protected his value so that if we do sell him, Arsenal would be looking to get, hopefully, a good fee for him. I'd be looking to get upwards of 20 million, 25 million pounds for Eddie Nketiah, and I hope that we would get that.
Yeah, and you mentioned like the last subject, Ivan Toney. I saw few reports that we are in talk with Brighton. We are trying to bring him on the loan, but I'm not so sure that is anything legit because you know, to be honest, Brighton is waiting for Ivan Toney since that happened with the betting, and they are waiting for him, and they will give him chance to play 100%. So I'm not so sure about that. I saw that he changed his agency. I don't know, half a year ago, let's say.
Sure.
Not important information so much, but how do you see that linking with Ivan Toney? But it's constantly now in the last few weeks that Ivan Toney, Arsenal is trying, Arsenal is doing this, Arsenal is doing that. Do you think there is any chance that Arsenal will bring attacker? But I would say that David Ornstein said that he's expecting a really quiet transfer window from Arsenal. But do you think there is any chance for bringing anyone? And if that anyone is maybe attacker?
Yeah, I think there is scope for Arsenal to do business. I agree with David that the expectation is not going to be, you know, that Arsenal are going to go like they did last January, where they signed 3 players and spent, you know, it was a £50 million on 3 separate players. Trossard was 27, Kivior was around 20, and Jorginho was 12. So, you know, we spent close to £60 million on 3 players. I don't think we'll see 3 players coming. You might see, you know, a fee that's closer to £50 million spent on 1 player if they think the right player is there. But it's if that player is there for them to sign. Ivan Toney in January, I'm not sure. I saw the suggestions on social media yesterday that that Arsenal would looking at pursuing a loan, you know, for him. I've certainly not heard that that's the case. I don't know why Brentford would do that. They know that they can get a very good fee for Toney. There's been suggestions that he might even be open to signing a new deal with Brentford. And obviously they'd rather have Brentford than the money. Sorry, they'd rather have Toney than the money. So, yeah, I don't see why they would want to allow him to leave. Like with Raya, they knew that they're going to get the £30 million from Arsenal in the summer because the expectation is Arsenal, that option will be activated. But with Toney, they know that a lot of clubs are interested. Arsenal are interested, but, you know, whether or not they move for him is another thing. Chelsea are definitely interested. And I'm sure that there are other teams out there that are keen on Toney as well. But how he responds after this long period of time away from the game, we don't know. That's obviously a big risk. His age is not the type of age profile that we tend to go for, especially with centre forwards and forward players. So that's something to think about. And the price, you know, Brentford have been quoted at something like £80 million for Ivan Toney. So a loan with an option at 80 odd million quid, I don't think he's worth that. And as I mentioned, his non-penalty goals per start ratio for the club is very similar to Nketiah's non-penalty goal per start ratio in the last couple of seasons. So Arsenal don't get loads of penalties. You know, I think we've had 1, maybe 2 this season. We don't get loads of pens, so it's not like we're going to benefit from that necessarily. And I also think that stylistically, Gabriel Jesus is the style of striker that Arsenal and Arteta like, and Toney doesn't tend to produce a lot of shot creating situations. If you actually have a look at his goals and assists per 90 metric, it's not as good as Jesus's. Jesus contributes more goals in terms of goals and assists than Toney does. And I think that other players around Jesus wouldn't necessarily be as potent because they wouldn't be getting as many chances they get when Jesus is on the field as they would if Toney was the centre forward.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I even think that maybe a better option for me would be a player that play for the team that we are playing the weekend. It's a Brighton, of course. Even Ferguson is my pick, but I'm not sure I will ever see it because Tony Bloom is like really poker face, you know. Yeah, so it won't be cheap at all. It will be like 100 million plus. I'm pretty sure. Ridiculous, and okay, so just to ask you, what do you think about the match against Brighton? What the result do you expect? Win, draw, lose by Arsenal? We are playing on Emirates, so I think the final will be here for us.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I don't think we've beaten Brighton at the Emirates in a very long time. They beat us 3-0 last season.
Sorry for interrupting you. I was doing research. 2021 was the last, but before that, it was 2015.
Yeah, so we've got 1 win in, what, 7 years, something like that. So
yeah.
It's terrible records. Brighton have always seemingly had our number, you know, at the Emirates. I remember Trossard scoring, you know, at the Emirates as well. And obviously last season we lost 3-0 in quite emphatic fashion. Now they've lost McAllister, they've lost Caicedo, they won't have those two. They've not had the best season in regards to how they've responded to losing those players. Like previously we've seen Brighton respond quite well to losing key players like Ben White or Cucurella. You know, they've lost these players and still managed to do quite well. But this time around, with McAllister and Caicedo gone, they have suffered. I think that Matoma has only just come back from injury as well, of course. So we've got to consider that. I think that Arsenal will have the edge this time around. I think that they will be confident going into this game that they can get a result, and should certainly get a result in this game as well. So I will be certainly hoping and expecting a victory, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, I think we just need to win this match, because we can't let ourselves to maybe go to Liverpool with 4 points behind, so it will be really, really bad. So I think it's must win. The guys, the Tom Canton was here with us today. Tom, thank you one more time very, very much. It was my pleasure to talk with you, and hope that we will have a chance to talk again. I'm coming to London next March, so if I see you, beer on me, of course.
Perfect. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you everyone for watching the show. Of course, like, share, subscribe on our channel. Of course, like, share, subscribe on Tom's channel. And that's all. Thank you very much, and goodbye.